Hi everybody, this is Nikki and I am here to do a video that is personal experience, no medical advice whatsoever. And this has to do with the T-Slim X2 alerts, alarms, and reminders. So quick little background as to why I'm doing it. I do run a Facebook group where we were all 670G, I think, in the beginning. That was the point of the group. And there was a common thread in the 670G users, and that was that these pumps were really needy. They were very loud and everything else, and especially once you got into auto mode, it could be overwhelmingly noisy. And so that seemed to be with that pump. Then along came the X2. I know I've moved over to it. A number of people in the group have moved over to it, and comparatively speaking, it felt like it was much, much quieter. So that was wonderful. And in fact, I do think it's much quieter. But with the new Control IQ coming in, the question is, will some of those alarms start to, will it start to be louder again because it needs to communicate new things to the user because it's an automated delivery. So there has been a little bit more in the group, kind of general, not even complaints, some questions, some concerns, whatever, about about how often the pump needs to communicate things to you. I currently am wearing the Omnipod, and I'm hoping to jump back off of it again within the next 8 weeks, and I am headed back to the X2. And alarms is definitely a weak area in my life, and that's because I have a tendency to ignore everything. So if I have a pump that's alarming me too often, I don't respond to it more often. I stop responding, altogether. So it's in my best interest to really have a pump that's honed in on communicating what I need to know. And the great news is there's ways to customize this so that when I do hear it chime, I know it's something I need to take a look at, rather than it's been chiming all day. And the last 12 times I looked at it, it had nothing to tell me. Maybe it showed me I was a 220 when in actuality I had been a 246 the last time I looked. So I don't care that I'm a 220. That's a good thing. But it's just now alerting me. That kind of communication actually makes management more difficult for me. Okay, so basically what I did is I went into both the manual. I made a couple phone calls to Tandem. And what I was looking for is some basic information on the T-Slim X2, but then also information that would apply to the 3 current software versions, and that is the Basal IQ software version 6.03, the updated version 6.31, and then the Control IQ software 7.31. So this is specific to the X2, but what I will say is that in the process of learning this, I picked up my Omnipod and I quieted it down. And it was interesting for me to realize how many things, even thinking I had already cleaned it up, how many things I still had that I just didn't understand. So my pump was constantly chiming. Anyway, okay, so I think the way to handle this is general information and tips that apply to the X2, to all 3 different software versions, and then I'll cut the movie out. I'll cut the video out, and then I'll try to come back and actually bring the X2 so that I can show you where I'm looking. Okay, so general information and tips. The following information is stuff that applies to all the Basal IQ software versions and Control IQ software version. There is plenty of overlap between the 3 versions, although there have been some changes to the updated Basal IQ and Control IQ. There is still a lot of it that's the same. Changes do include the addition of new alerts and alarms in Control IQ, which makes sense because that's like auto mode, as well as changes in where these settings can be found. So a lot of it is the exact same. They just moved around the locations for the settings. Okay, the number 1 tip, and this is actually what I've learned how to do with my Omnipod. The number 1 tip for all software versions on the X2. It is recommended to clear the reminder, alert, or alarm as soon as you hear it. I know some people already do it. I know some people are great about it, and some people are rolling their eyes going, yeah, well, of course you're supposed to do that. but I didn't do it, and in reality, I didn't have time to do it, and so if I it became background noise, and I got used to ignoring it. Delayed acknowledgement of an alarm will result in repeated notifications. So a lot of times you just have these things, they're going to repeat every 5 minutes. So it's hurting you not to just take a quick look and clear it. But the bigger concern is that as long as you have this one alarm that's continuing to repeat, that you might not recognize that a new alarm or a new form of communication has come in. So prompt acknowledgement is ideal. And I have made myself start taking a look at the Omnipod as soon as I hear the alarm and just clearing it. And a lot of times that means 3 hours of complete silence. So that has been a huge piece. And I know some people just, they'll, of course you're supposed to look at it. But if you have too many alarms going off, you might not be looking. Alarm fatigue. I think that's what it's called, and it's very real. Okay, setting to vibrate. Again, this is for the X2. Any type of notification that cannot be turned off can be set to vibrate. True alarms, which communicate the potential or current suspension of insulin, will escalate in volume. So even if it's set to vibrate, it will begin to chime, and then it'll chime and vibrate, and it'll just keep getting louder. And it will go off every 5 minutes. So it's a constant, there is no way to get that to quiet down because you need to take action. Clearing these alarms is only possible after the problem has been fixed. Most other alerts and reminders will never escalate and will continue to vibrate only. So true alarms aside, everything else that you set to vibrate will only vibrate. Even, the repeated notifications will only vibrate. It's another way to quiet down your pump. Okay, reminders, alerts, and alarms, functions, and tones. This was also true of the 670, that they had different names, and the reason they weren't all called alarms is because they had different functions. So it was interesting to understand what they are, which groups you can really kind of eliminate if you don't want to hear from your pump all day long, which ones you have very little control over, and what the associated tones are. So they are as follows. The functions of, first of all, there's 3 different names for them. They're called reminders, they're called alerts, and they're called alarms. So there's 3 different categories of what you'll hear from your pump. Your reminders are optional notifications of the following. You can get a low BG reminder, a high BG reminder, an after bolus BG reminder, a missed meal bolus reminder, and a site reminder. This is going to be true for all 3 of the versions. I hope I didn't mess that up, but I think it's true for all 3. Reminders sound with a single sequence of 3 notes, so they go deet deet deet, or a single vibration, and they'll repeat every 10 minutes until acknowledged. If you put them to vibrate, then they will only vibrate. They'll never get any louder. But these are really optional because these are just reminders. These are not communicating to you anything that's happening with the pump. It's just kind of reminding you. It's supposed to be behavioral, to help you remember things. For me, I can them all. I'm checking and I'm doing enough stuff that I don't need a reminder to check my blood sugar because I do that all day, every day anyway. But that's going to be user specific. Okay. Alerts. Alerts are automatic notifications that communicate changes in conditions that may affect the user's safety. So these are automatic notifications. So these are not preset. These are not like 1 hour after a food bolus. This is going to happen whenever it senses it. These include, and this is a long list, low insulin alerts, CGM high and low alerts, fixed low alerts, CGM error alerts, CGM calibration alerts, which, unlike on the 670G, really are rare, and they most commonly occur when the user has not entered a code. When they start up a sensor and they have not entered the code. They are rare when you have entered a code, but they can happen. Transmitter alerts, incomplete actions alerts, such as incomplete bolus or fill tubing, basal alerts, max and minimum basal, and out of range alerts. Alerts sound with a double sequence of 3 notes or vibrations. They will repeat regularly until acknowledged, and again, they will not escalate. Some can be silenced by turning them off, while others can be set to vibrate. So again, there is no reason to ever have to hear these. They can be set to vibrate, or some can be silenced, some can't be, but they can all be set to vibrate, and they will not ever escalate. So that's another batch of communications that you can hear, that you can receive without being overwhelmed by the volume of them. Oh my God, it's 10 minutes. Okay. Alarms. Alarms are automatic notification that warn of current or potential stoppage of insulin. These you need to hear. It means that either your pump has stopped delivering insulin to you or it's going to. The following are alarms: low power alarm, empty cartridge alarm, a cartridge alarm for an overfilled or loaded incorrectly cartridge, a cartridge alarm meaning that the cartridge is out, a temperature alarm, occlusion alarm, button alarm, altitude alarm, pump has been reset, and resume pump alarm. Again, these are going to escalate. So, it might start as a vibrate if you set it to vibrate, but if you haven't addressed it, it will escalate and continue to get louder. And these are expressed in a series of 3 sequences of 3 notes or 3 sequences of 3 vibrations. That's fine. Okay. A big one for the X2 when you're trying to kind of quiet down your pump is checking all of your settings. Adjustable settings can be found in numerous places. In order to optimize settings, it is recommended the user methodically explore each of the 3 following areas. On your pump, you can find stuff in your pump alert settings. You can also find on your pump in the CGM alert settings. So there's 2 different categories within your pump. But then you also have to go to your phone app or your I don't think it's called a reader. It's not a reader. I can't think of what it is. You have to go to your phone app, and you have to change your settings on the phone app too. One does not automatically transfer to the other. So just because you have your settings the way you like it on your pump does not mean it's gonna be that way on your phone. You have to set both. So there are 3 areas that you need to work on in order to fully, quiet it down. And then the last one is the resume pump alarm workaround. There's been questions as to whether or not if you manually suspend your pump, is there any way to avoid having to hear the alarm letting you know that your pump has been suspended? The resume pump alarm, which occurs when the pump has been suspended for longer than 15 minutes, even manually, will notify the user every 5 minutes until delivery is resumed. Because this falls under the category of an alarm, there is no setting enabling the user to silence it. So no, you cannot silence it. However, there's a workaround that might suffice. Instead of manually suspending the pump, another option is to set the temp rate to 0 for the amount of the time that one would be suspended. So instead of suspending it for an hour, I would set it to a temp rate of 0 for an hour. Both of them will suspend the insulin. With a temp rate in place instead of a suspension, there will be no alarm. However, I would like to emphasize the fact there will be no alarm. So that means that you have to remember that you've done this. The alarm is in place to remind the user of the suspension of insulin, so user beware. And that's kind of random, but it's not. This is ways to silence the pump. And I will come back and do some settings information by software version. Thank you very much, and have a good one. Bye.